Hi, welcome back for the last lesson for chapter 6. We are going to be gathering evidence about the new setting. So let's take a look at our chart. We wrote some page numbers down the last time, but remember that that description of the new setting pointed out how similar this setting looked to Earth. But our question, if we go back up to the top, really asks us how this new setting is different from Earth. So we want to look for those details that we can use to describe the new setting and how it's different. If you are in the yellow book, you are on page 103, and if you're in the black book, you're at the top of page 115. Either way, there is a break right before we're going to begin. Follow along with me. Below them, the town was laid out in harsh, angular patterns. The houses in the outskirts were all exactly alike. Small square boxes painted gray. Each had a small rectangular plot of lawn in front, with a straight line of dull-looking flowers edging the path to the door. Meg had a feeling that if she could count the flowers, there would be exactly the same number for each house. In front of all the houses, children were playing. Some were skipping rope, some were bouncing balls. Meg felt vaguely that something was wrong with their play. It seemed exactly like children playing around any housing development at home, and yet there was something different about it. She looked at Kelvin and saw that he too was puzzled. So we get a little bit of a description. It sounds a lot like a neighborhood type community where all of the houses are exactly the same. But not only are the houses exactly the same, but they're pretty much laid out in the same way. The flowers are the same, and even every single child is outside playing. You could possibly pull a quote from here, but let's keep getting some more information so we really know where we want our quotes to be. Look, Charles Wallace said suddenly, they're skipping and bouncing in rhythm. Everyone's doing it at exactly the same moment. This was so. As the skipping rope hit the pavement, so did the ball. As the rope curved over the head of a jumping child, the child with the ball caught the ball. Down came the ropes, down came the balls, over and over again, up, down, all in rhythm. All identical, like the houses, like the paths, like the flowers. That might be one of our best quotes. Should we pull it now? Let's do it. Let's, since I already have these here, let's jump down to the next one. And we're gonna put a quote in here. So I'm on page 103. And what did I say? The other book, you're on page 115. All right, we're gonna pull those, and although they have them as two words with a period, this is the ability of a writer to be able to include fragments. Those are not complete sentences, but we're gonna put them down as so. Remember that we start with a quotation mark because these are the exact words from the book. I'm gonna start right with all identical. Like the houses. So we know all the houses are identical. Like the paths, all the paths are identical. Like the flowers, all the flowers are identical. The children are, well, I don't know if they look identical, but their rhythm, a bouncing of the ball and the jumping rope is all in rhythm, it's all identical. Let's keep reading. Then the doors of all the houses opened simultaneously. All the doors opened at the exact same time. And out came women, like a row of paper dolls. The print of their dresses was different, but they all gave the appearance of being the same. Each woman stood on the steps of her house. Each clapped. Each child with the ball caught the ball. Each child with a skipping rope folded the rope. Each child turned and walked into the house. The doors clicked shut behind them. How can they do it? Meg asked wonderingly. We couldn't do it that way if we tried. What does it mean? Let's go back. Kelvin's voice was urgent. Back? Charles Wallace asked. Where? I don't know. Anywhere. Back to the hill? Back to Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who and Mrs. Which? I don't like this. But they aren't there. Do you think they'd come to us if we turned back now? I don't like it, Calvin said again. Wonder what he doesn't like. Come on, impatience made Meg squeak. You know we can't go back. Mrs. Whatsit said to go into the town. She started on down the street, and the two boys followed her. The houses, all identical, continued as far as the eye could reach. Then all at once they saw the same thing and stopped to watch. In front of one of the houses stood a little boy with a ball, and he was bouncing it. But he bounced it rather badly and with no particular rhythm, sometimes dropping it and running after it with awkward, furtive leaps, sometimes throwing it up into the air and trying to catch it. The door of his house opened, and out ran one of the mother figures. She looked wildly up and down the street, saw the children, put her hand to her mouth as to stifle a scream, grabbed the little boy, and rushed indoors with him. The ball dropped from his fingers and rolled out into the street. Why is the mother afraid? The boy was doing something different, wasn't he? Everybody else was identical. And she's afraid because he's not the same. He's not conforming. Charles Wallace ran after it and picked it up, holding it out for Meg and Calvin to see. It seemed like a perfectly ordinary brown rubber ball. Let's take it to him and see what happens, Charles Wallace suggested. Meg pulled at him. Mrs. Whatsit said for us to go on into town. Well, we are in the town, aren't we? The outskirts, anyhow. I want to know more about this. I have a hunch it may help us later. You go on if you don't want to come with me. No, Calvin said firmly. We're going to stay together. Mrs. Whatsit said we weren't to let them separate us. But I'm with you on this. Let's knock and see what happens. They went up the path to the house. Meg, reluctant, eager to get on into town. Let's hurry, she begged. Please, don't you want to find Father? Yes, Charles Wallace said, but not blindly. How can we help him if we don't know what we're up against? And it's obvious we're being brought here to help him, not just to find him. He walked briskly up the steps and knocked at the door. They waited. Nothing happened. Then Charles Wallace saw a bell, and this he rang. They could hear the bell buzzing in the house, and the sound of it echoed down the street. After a moment, the mother figure opened, but only a crack. Eyes peered toward the three children, and the woman looking fearfully out the door at them. What do you want? She asked. It isn't paper time yet. We've had milk time. We've had this month's puller prush person, and I've given my decency donations regularly. All my papers are in order. I think your little boy dropped his ball, Charles Wallace said, holding it out. The woman pushed the ball away. Oh no, the children in our section never drop balls. They're all perfectly trained. We haven't had an aberration for 3 years. What an odd statement. They're all perfectly trained. Never dropped balls. Aberration would be like a broken rule. All up and down the block, heads nodded in agreement. Charles Wallace moved closer to the woman and looked past her into the house. Behind her in the shadows, he could see the little boy, who must have been about his own age. You can't come in, the woman said. You haven't shown me any papers. I don't have to let you in if you haven't any papers. So that could be something else we could pull in. It's not necessarily a specific detail about the setting, but we're starting to get to know a little bit more about Camazotz, and she's mentioned multiple times the papers. I also want to go back, but think of elementary school a little bit. You know how you have a very specific routine you go through, we do this time, we have snack time, we have gym time, etc. It isn't paper time yet. We haven't had milk time, or we've had milk time. We've had this month's puller prush. So different times that somebody might come to the door, dropping off the paper, bringing the milk. She's trying to figure out, why are you at my door? This isn't normal. We have our very strict routine. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I'm back on 106 after the papers, or 116 probably in the other book. Charles Wallace held the ball out beyond the woman so that the little boy could see it. Quick as a flash, the boy leaped forward and grabbed the ball from Charles Wallace's hand, then darted back into the shadows. The woman went very white, opened her mouth as though to say something, then slammed the door in their faces instead. All up and down the street, doors slammed. "What are they afraid of?" Charles Wallace asked. "What's the matter with them?" "Don't you know?" Meg asked him. "Don't you know what this is all about, Charles?" "Not yet," Charles Wallace said. "Not even an inkling. And I'm trying, but I didn't get through anywhere. Not even a chink. Let's go." He stumped down the steps. After several blocks, the houses gave way to apartment buildings. At least Meg felt sure that was what they must be. So now we get a new part of the setting. They were fairly tall, rectangular buildings, absolutely plain. Each window, each entrance exactly like every other. Then coming toward them down the street was a boy about Calvin's age, riding a machine that was something like a combination of a bicycle and a motorcycle. It had the slimness and lightness of a bicycle, and yet as the foot pedals turned, they seemed to generate an unseen source of power, so that the boy could pedal very slowly and yet move along the street quite swiftly. As he reached each entrance, he thrust one hand into a bag he wore slung over his shoulder, pulled out a roll of papers, and tossed it into the entrance. It might have been Denny's or Sandy's, or any one of hundreds of boys with a newspaper route in any one of hundreds of towns back home. And yet, as with the children playing ball and jumping rope, there was something wrong about it. The rhythm of the gesture never varied. The paper flew in identically the same arc at each doorway, landed in identically the same spot. It was impossible for anybody to throw with such consistent perfection. Calvin whistled. Wonder if they play baseball here. As the boy saw them, he slowed down on his machine and stopped. His hand rested as it was about to plunge into the paper bag. "What are you kids doing out on the street?" he demanded. "Only root boys are allowed out now. You know that." Another part of the routine. "No, we don't know it," Charles Wallace said. "We're strangers here. How about telling us something about this place?" "You mean you've had your entrance papers processed and everything?" the boy asked. "You must have if you're here," he answered himself. "And what are you doing here if you don't know about us?" "You tell me," Charles Wallace asked. "Are you examiners?" the boy asked a little anxiously. "Everybody knows our city has the best Central Intelligence Center on the planet. Our production levels are the highest, our factories never close, our machines never stop rolling. Added to this, we have 5 poets, 1 musician, 3 artists, and 6 sculptors, all perfectly channeled." This could be part of your setting too. That could be a quote that you pull. There's several things that this root boy tells them about the planet. Everybody knows our city has the best Central Intelligence Center on the planet. I wonder what a Central Intelligence Center is. And he goes on to explain production levels, the factories that don't close, how many great minds they have. That could be a quote. I don't know what he means by perfectly channeled. Do you? "What are you quoting from?" Charles Wallace asked. "The manual, of course," the boy said. "We are the most oriented city on the planet. There has been no trouble of any kind for centuries. All Camazotz knows our record. That is why we are the capital city of Camazotz. That is why Central Intelligence is located here. That is why it makes its home here." There was something about the way he said "it" that made a shiver run up and down Meg's spine. I want to point out that when we see the capital IT for it, it is referencing kind of like a character, okay? But Charles Wallace asked briskly, "Where is this Central Intelligence Center of yours?" Central, the boy corrected. "Just keep going and you can't miss it. You are strangers, aren't you? What are you doing here?" Are you supposed to ask questions? Charles Wallace demanded severely. The boy went quite white, just as the woman had. I humbly beg your pardon. I must continue my route now, or I will have to talk my timing into the explainer. And he shot off down the street on his machine. Charles Wallace started after him. What is it? He asked Meg and Charles. I'm guessing that's a mistake. It should be Calvin. There was something funny about the way he talked, as though he weren't really doing the talking. Know what I mean? Calvin nodded thoughtfully. Funny is right. Funny peculiar. Not only the way he talked either. The whole thing smells. Something's going on. Come on, Meg pulled at them. How many times was it she had urged them on? Let's go find Father. He'll be able to explain it all to us. They walked on. After several more blocks, they began to see other people, grown-up people, not children, walking up and down and across the streets. These people ignored the children entirely, seeming to be completely intent on their own business. Some of them went into the apartment buildings. Most of them were heading in the same direction as the children. As these people came to the main street from the side streets, they would swing around the corners with an odd automatic stride, as though they were deep in their own problems, and the route was so familiar that they didn't have to pay any attention to where they were going. After a while, the apartment buildings gave way to what must have been office buildings, great stern structures with enormous entrances. Men and women with briefcases poured in and out. So here's a description we could take too. So we've left the apartment buildings, which we could have used as well, but there wasn't much about them. We get into the office buildings where they describe them, great structures with enormous entrances, but I'm not sure how much you can really describe that and connect it. Charles Wallace went up to one of the women, saying politely, "Excuse me, but could you please tell me?" But she hardly glanced at him as she continued on her way. Look, Meg pointed. Ahead of them, across a square, was the largest building they had ever seen, higher than the Empire State Building, and almost as long as it was high. This must be it, Charles Wallace said. Their central intelligence, or whatever it is. Let's go on. That might be a better one. I'm going to go back for a second. I'm going to record a page number while I'm thinking of it. I got to pick which one do I want. So that description of central intelligence on 110 in the yellow book, or here, let me put a dash this way. I'm not sure what page it is in the other one. I think I've read on too far. So hopefully you have that in front of you. Make a little note. We're going to go back, pick out what's our best quote that we could use. Okay. But if Father's in some kind of trouble with this planet, Meg objected, isn't that exactly where we shouldn't go? Well, how do you propose finding him? Charles Wallace demanded. I certainly wouldn't ask there. I didn't say anything about asking, but we aren't going to have the faintest idea where or how to begin to look for him until we find out something more about this place. And I have a hunch that that's the place to start. If you have a better idea, Meg, why, of course, just say so. Oh, get down off your high horse, Meg said crossly. Let's go to your old central intelligence and get it over with. I think we ought to have passports or something, Calvin suggested. This is much more than leaving America to go to Europe. And that boy and the woman both seem to care so much about having things in proper order. We certainly haven't got any papers in proper order. If we needed passports or papers, Mrs. Whatsit would have told us so, Charles Wallace said. Calvin put his hands on his hips and looked down at Charles Wallace. Now look here, old sport. I love those 3 old girls as much as you do, but I'm not sure they know everything. They know a lot more than we do. Granted, but you know Mrs. Whatsit talked about having been a star. I wouldn't think that being a star would give her much practice in knowing about people. When she tried to be a person, she came pretty close to goofing it up. There was never anybody on land or sea like Mrs. Whatsit, the way she got herself up. She was just having fun, Charles said. If she'd wanted to look like you or Meg, I'm sure she could have. Calvin shook his head. I'm not so sure. And these people seem to be people, if you know what I mean. They aren't like us, I grant you that. There's something very offbeat about them. But there's lots more like ordinary people than the ones on Uriel. Do you suppose they're robots? Meg suggested. Charles Wallace shook his head. No, that boy who dropped the ball wasn't any robot, and I don't think the rest of them are either. Let me listen for a minute. They stood very still, side by side in the shadow of one of the big office buildings. 6 large doors kept swinging, open, shut, as people went in and out, looking straight ahead, paying no attention to the children whatsoever. Charles wore his listening, probing look. They're not robots, he said suddenly and definitely. I'm not sure what they are, but they're not robots. I can feel minds there. I can't get at them at all, but I can feel them sort of pulsing. Let me try a minute more. The 3 of them stood there very quietly. The doors kept opening and shutting, and the stiff people hurried in and out, walking jerkily like figures in an old silent movie. Then abruptly, the stream of movement thinned. There were only a few people, and these moved more rapidly, as if the film had been speeded up. One white-faced man in a dark suit looked directly at the children and said, "Oh dear, I shall be late," and flickered into the building. He's like the White Rabbit. Meg giggled nervously. It's an illusion. It's referencing another book. Do you know what book that's from? The White Rabbit saying, "Oh dear, I'm going to be late." Alice in Wonderland. I'm scared, Charles said. I can't reach them at all. I'm completely shut out. We have to find Father, Meg started again. Meg, Charles Wallace's eyes were wide and frightened. I'm not sure I'll even know Father. It's been so long. I was only a baby. Meg's reassurance came quickly. You'll know him. Of course you'll know him. The way you'd know me even without looking, because I'm always there for you. You can always reach in. Yes, Charles punched one small fist into an open palm with a gesture of great decision. Let's go to Central Intelligence. Kelvin reached out and caught both Charles and Meg by the arm. You remember when we met? You asked me why I was there, and I told you it was because I had a compulsion, a feeling. I just had to come to that particular place at that particular moment. Yes, sure. I've got another feeling. Not the same kind, a different one. A feeling that if we go into that building, we're going into terrible danger. All right, so that is the end of the chapter, but we didn't quite gather our quotes. That's the hard part about us not necessarily working together in the classroom. We have one more quote to grab. Do we want to get the one? So let me just go back quickly. On 110, we had the part of the description of Central Intelligence. If I go back to page 99 in the yellow book or 111 on your book, that was the description of the hill. So they were on the hill. And then we also, somewhere within here, it was earlier, we had the description where she even just said that they were going to Camazotz. Do you remember that? When they were talking to the medium? Yep, it was the page before that. So it was 98. The other book is probably 110, when we know that they're going to Camazotz, and it's one of the dark planets. I actually think that's the quote I would prefer to pull. But once again, there's no right or wrong per se. You just need to be able to explain it. I do think it's pretty important that you identify the new setting and that we know that that is Camazotz. So I'm going to put in page 98 for the yellow book. And it would be, I'm sorry, it would 114? No, it's not. It's earlier. What did I say, 110? Hopefully you have that handy. You caught what I said earlier because I just deleted that. Okay, so I'm going to put mine in here. I'm going to add my quotation marks. She is speaking, so I'm going to put that single quotation mark again, and I'm going to put Camazotz, which is the name of the planet that they are going to, if I could type that correctly. And I'm probably going to use an ellipses and jump down to, you know you don't like looking in on the dark planets. All right, so I'm going to mention this. So that's the end of the quote that I have. So single dot, and I'm going to do the double. I have to hit shift to do that. When something underlines in red, when you are typing it, I hope that you realize that means that something has been possibly spelled wrong. Now, Camazotz, they're not going to recognize that as a word in the computer, so it's always going to be underlined in red. But, oh, what did I do wrong with looking? I can recognize that I need a G, but I can also right click on it and look, I get my choices and I can just pick the right one and change it. Okay, so when you type it, those are some of the things we can do there. So now you've pulled out your quotes, whether they're the same as mine or you've chosen your own. Hopefully you picked out at least 2 quotes about the new planet. In this box, you now need to explain those. So up here we have your inference. This is what you can figure out about it, your reasoning of what these reveal about the setting. So not the characters this time, the setting. Thinking about that question that we had, you're gonna have to describe the setting as it's introduced and how this new setting is different from Earth. So we're gonna explain a little bit about the fact that Camazotz, they're going to a new planet. It's one of the dark planets. And then we get this detail about everything being identical. You want to explain how is that different from Earth? And with the quote itself, it might be kind of tricky. But as we continue to read, you might be able to make some more inferences about how that is different. Everything that we read today gave you a lot of information about this new planet, both in the way that it looks, but also in the way that everybody acts. So make sure that you explain that clearly. I'm going to give you one more explanation. This time, not only do you have to have your whole chart filled in, but I want to remind you that we also have step 4. Now you need to use the chart and type out your answers to these questions. So you have question 1, you're going to give me a topic sentence. That is not in the chart. There's no place that we're pulling that from. You need to make sure that you include a topic sentence, go back to the question, restate it, and then you'll organize these quotes and your explanations into your answer. Now, we pulled 4 quotes for the first one. You don't necessarily have to put all 4 quotes in, but you do need to give specific details about all 4 parts of that, and you need to explain them. You also need to come back to your chart and mark off yes or a check mark if you use that information in your typed answer. And then you will do the exact same thing for the second one, where we just finished your quotes for the setting. Typed up answer, your second one's going to be shorter because we're not comparing and contrasting 2 people and their reactions. We're just describing the setting and telling how it's different. All right, leave you to work, hit stop, and get to work.